From a quiet career teaching psychology to becoming an overnight icon, Jordan Peterson has had a meteoric rise in fame, albeit sometimes controversial, mostly because of all the times he's expertly roasted feminist activists. For example, his debate with Sophie Walker has become the stuff of legends. Hats off to him for not looking at any notes or anything a single time in the entire debate, and keeping his cool without ever raising his voice. And that too, in a debate with the leader of the Women's Equality Party. The host started off by asking both of them what equality meant to them, and Walker tried gaining the higher ground by giving a vague answer of freedom. That's all well and good, but she couldn't elaborate on that to save her life. She said that Scandinavian countries were moving towards a more equal way of life, and Peterson agreed, but he clapped back and said that she needed to look at the data. As women were given more freedom of choices, data showed that lesser and lesser women chose to go into STEM fields.
I don't appeal primarily to the alt-right. There's no evidence for that at all. It's the proclivity of...
I never said.
Meaning they wouldn't take such challenging and potentially high-paying careers because they just didn't want to. So, as cultures become more gender neutral, women in those fields just naturally decrease. Peterson said that if you just let men and women make the choices that come to them naturally, they specialize in different things. And Walker tried playing it off as just his opinion, but he wasn't about to let it go so easily.
Why would you assume that if women are who have children are working part-time that they're being forced into it?
He literally shot off a few thousand scientific articles he had researched on, and said it wasn't his opinion, these were the cold hard facts. Sophie Walker tried pointing out how men and women were basically the same, in terms of personality, likes, dislikes, and everything else in between. So the question was, why are they treated differently when it comes to a competitive job market? She said that a study showed that media was what changed men's perception of themselves, but what she failed to consider, according to Peterson, was how it's in men's biology to be more aggressive. You take one random person out of 100 people, and if it's a male, then 60% of the time they'll be more aggressive, and that's what leads to more men being in prison. Walker just went silent. Where's the equality of choice now, huh? 99% of laborers like bricklayers, plumbers, and mechanics are males, whereas women take up 2/3 of the slots in universities in humanities subjects. According to Walker, should we be equalizing that too? Forcing more people to go into academically challenging subjects is a great way to let people live comfortably. And by this point, I think she started to realize it too. Funny to watch her crumbling when asked if she would like to work longer hours like most men. So what Jordan left a lot of people wondering, including Walker I think, is that if men and women are given equal opportunity, will women even want to become equals? Because right now, according to actual evidence, that's just not the case. His shutting down of Helen Lewis on British GQ was even more impressive. At least she talked to him respectfully, and when she knew he had won the argument, she just gave up and agreed. Lewis started off by saying that society was inherently patriarchal, but Peterson said that definition was wrong, and asked her what that even means to her. Most positions of power are held by men. The richest people in the world are men. Women end up doing more unpaid labor, but Peterson took it personally, and you can see the switch when he shifts in his chair slightly, and asked her if she wanted to count statistics, why not count how most cases of suicide are men? More cases of depression are among men. Prisons are filled mostly by men. Even in universities, men are doing worse than women. So where exactly is the dominance? She was taking a very tiny number of men from the very huge amount of people in the world.
What about that? Yeah. I think that's definitely the case.
I feel stigmatized, like I shouldn't be here.
First of all, there's an easy solution to that.
And at this point, she looked scared. She went on to say that violence was also done more by men, since there were almost no women raped men. Peterson agreed that there was an unequal amount, but bad things happen to both sexes. That does not mean that society is just patriarchal. The imbalance isn't because men just want more positions of power. Society has a need for people who are competent and can earn those places based on their merits. So it's not men's fault they are getting those because they work longer hours. He asked her if she hired a plumber and he was male, wasn't she contributing to the male-dominated structure too?
In the book, and there's nothing in anything I've ever said that suggests that.
Okay, no,
but it's really important because people have read this chapter.
Nobody forced her to find a male plumber, but she probably wouldn't be able to find a female plumber as easily either. The Australian Labour Party politician Terry Butler also clashed with Peterson, and she got completely destroyed. He started off mild enough and said that he wasn't anti-feminist, but he didn't agree with the more radical side of feminism. The people that said that masculinity was toxic, and that Western culture is now just a patriarchal oppressive system. And that makes sense. He said that it's very dangerous when people start thinking that masculinity is bad. It's just as bad psychologically for women as it is for men.
Representative democracy should be representative. Maybe you just think that women should be equally represented in the decision-making fora of our nation.
So consider this, since masculinity is toxic, as women gain more equality and they take on the masculine roles in society, which they are apparently being denied, where does that leave them? It's a never-ending cycle of doubt and guilt, but Terry Butler cut him off mid-sentence and said that nobody believes masculinity is toxic. Honestly, it was kind of funny, because Peterson stopped dead in his tracks, and the entire crowd started laughing. She said that toxic masculinity was just a term for describing some of the harmful aspects of it, but Peterson wasn't about to let that slide.
If bricklayers are men, should we have quotas for women?
Is bricklaying representative democracy?
He quoted several studies he researched and said that the term was more harmful than people realized. It didn't target aggressive behaviors only. Instead, it put a huge red flag on the entire concept of masculinity since it was quoted everywhere as such a broad term. Butler obviously had no answer to that.
Why don't we talk about it across the board?
Okay, so let's just pause and...
yeah, but that's because it's power.
You pose a question to Terry Butler.
And just smiled and said that she agreed to disagree. But Peterson is right. People on the internet hail him as being some kind of feminist destroyer. In fact, in most of his interviews, he says he actually cares about the problems women face.
To push back against the absolute catastrophe of existence, a terrible death rate, the probability of chronic starvation.
People forget he is an actual scientist. He says he has studied how globally more rights have been given to women, but it's overlooked how women are unhappier compared to the 50s. The research study, The Paradox of Declining Female Happiness, talks exactly about this. It says that women from the middle and lower classes are the least happy with the new rights they are given. They end up working for very low wages, and still have to commit to children.
To recover from a particularly contentious interview, because I find conflict, interpersonal conflict, quite stressful.
So they end up unhappier and unsatisfied. He also roasted Betty Friedan for doing the same thing. He said she whined on and on in the feminine mystique. So if that doesn't show you what he thinks about feminism, I don't know what does. She says that women want more than just families now, but Peterson literally said, Jesus, get a hobby. He believes that housewives live a life of ease that's given to them by their husbands working like 24 hours a day, and then into their 50s, they suddenly get bored, and then decide that they are craving more involvement with society. That's all for the times Jordan Peterson destroyed feminists.